And if you're not talking, just sit on mute as well. Would be good. Everybody else, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So welcome everyone to the first digital Perth Dynamics 365 user group. As mentioned, we have started recording this, so if you don't want to be recorded, don't come off mute, make sure your video is turned off, and we'll jump in. So today's agenda, Byron. Why is there fancy graphics happening on here, Ben?
We'll remove that for next time.
So the main presentation today, Ravi's going to take us through the latest with Maptaskr. Then we'll have Ian's going to take us through a portal business rules via config one tip. And then Byron, we have the pleasure of hearing goodbye workflows and hello power automate. And the usual housekeeping, make sure you know where your toilets are wherever you are. We'll try to keep to time, and please be aware of your evacuation if you should need it. Oh, just more animations.
Yeah, online only. Yeah. Don't need those ones.
So up first, Ravi, with the ISV showcase of Maptaskr. Ravi, please present and take over when you're ready.
Thanks, David. Thanks for Ben as well, giving me an opportunity to present to the whole wider community. Probably I know a few of the guys on the list, but a few of them I haven't met before, so it's good to meet you online. Hopefully we'll meet you in person one day. I shall take over by presenting my screen. Please do let me know once you can actually start seeing my screen.
Confirmed.
I think so. Like most of you maybe might have heard the name Maptaskr. We're a local ISV born here in Perth. We've been going for just over a year and a half. So our roots lie down in GIS world. We're heavy on GIS and mapping side of things. And coming from a background of GIS and mapping and also Microsoft has played a big role into what we built. So basically, we're like a coastal certified ISV built on the Microsoft platform, on the Power Platform, and also focusing on the dynamic side of things. Although we kind of talk about within our product suite around advanced GIS side of things, and also like the field sales side of things. And today's presentation, I was just going to talk around the field sales. Due to the time constraints, usually the advanced GIS requires a bit more in-depth kind of demonstration and time sort of things. I would probably plan that to give you guys a demo in the future on that side of things. But today's demonstration, I wanted to walk you through field sales for Dynamics 365. Basically, it's an app available on the App Stores where you can download and actually get going. So basically, like Maptaskr, with the background of GIS and mapping and stuff, one of the core things that we do is specialize in field staff productivity and optimization. And what we mean by that is many organizations do have a number of people are on road or on the go, trying to get access to various information, their business systems and whatnot. Especially if you're in the world of CRM and Dynamics, it's getting those key details to them, to their fingertips, and also helping them to perform the activities that they need to. Part of our research, what we've found is and an average field rep would spend probably 40% of the time doing non-setting activities that involves, for example, loading up account data, customer data, and actually updating different details and other business information that they may be required part of their given working day. What we aim to do is we want to reduce that time by providing, a better way to access that information and help them to actually improve their productivity per se. There's 8 steps that we do, and 8 steps are basically our different feature sets that we form around providing them, using the map as a base to help them to visualize their customers, their contacts, what are the sales data that they're looking at, and there's a couple of other features in terms of optimization, their route. There's a mobile first approach, so anything that they view on the browser is equally available on the mobile side of things as well. And whilst we've been looking into this in depth, working with salespeople on numerous fronts with a couple of customers, what we've realized is usually we've found them is the salespeople on the road might be end up targeting different leads or customers because they didn't have that information that they required, and more importantly is how to automate things for them. So, for example, if they're at that given location, they want to quickly book an appointment rather than switching apps or switching different things. How do we automate things like that and help them actually plan their activities, not only in a given moment of time, but actually going in weeks in advance as well. Part of today's demonstration, what I will do is I'll basically talk about the field's sales rep kind of use case. He or she might be on the road, and how would they access the tool, and how they actually help to improve their productivity. The sales director and territory play similar roles, but they have advanced kind of permissions to per se to create, for example, sales territories, or actually decide who falls in a sales team, and so forth. Part of our offering, we are like an ISV, so we are available in the app stores. We're available to download right away from the app stores, and also we have our own native mobile apps on Apple and Google stores. We do work with Microsoft's Dynamics 365 phones, but also we have our own native app as well. With native map, we've found that mapping is a heavy kind of load on the phone. Just with Microsoft's app, where it kind of lags in sometimes, and so therefore our offerings around the mobile side of things as well. Jumping from presentation, I think it's worth seeing. Seeing is believing. So I'll just switch to my tenancy, and I'll just walk you through a few cool features that we built over the year. And again, this is being used by over 6,000 field reps as we speak today, and these sales reps are based throughout the world, in the US, in Australia, and New Zealand. What you're noticing is just one of my demo tenancies that I've logged in. You'll notice that Maptaskr has been installed, part of Unified Interface. It's been downloaded from the app source. I'll just right click and open that in a new tab. What you notice that is right away, the map would load up the current location where I'm based in, and it's running certain data and it's bringing back. What it's done now is me as a field sales representative, I'm on a road, it's picked up my current location, and it's brought back all my active accounts that are relevant to me, that it's identified in the given radius of, I think, 10 kilometers. What this enables the field rep is, on the go, they might be in different locations without minimal kind of searching or doing anything. We have represented them with a bunch of accounts that they need to deal with. Now they can quickly zoom in to see what those accounts are, and you'll notice that where I'm based as well, this blue dot, and I can click on those ones just to see what that account is. Basically some basic information around name, address, and there's certain actions. For example, if I wanted to book an appointment, I can quickly click on the appointment action, fill in the details. All the addresses are pre-filled, the person's pre-filled. All they need to do is add a subject, and they're off. Similarly, they've got other actions. These are again completely customizable by customers or by partners per se. Also, we've got things like details. You can pre-fill them with details if you had any appointments, and I'll come back to reports in a bit. I could click on individual accounts that way to see who they are, what they are, but it can get tedious. There are settings within the application where you can actually show the names underneath those pins, so it makes it a little more obvious for the sales rep what they're looking at. But more importantly, there's a data grid here. They can quickly look into what those users are or the accounts are, and you'll notice that it also shows the exact distance that account is from their given current location. So as a sales rep, I'm at a given location. I want to plan a certain activities that I want to see, a bunch of accounts or customers that they would like to see for that day. They can basically actually determine based on the distance they are. So I could select, for example, Abby here, Glenn there. I can select Nora. I can say, well, I could click on individual. It would tell me where they are. For example, if I click again on Abby, it will just zoom on to Abby exactly to give me the address. But I can go back in there and say, well, I'm going to add them to my, we can add them to a marketing list if you wanted to, and then do those marketing activities, or actually I might want to perform my routing. And with the routing, I might have said, take my current location and plan that route for me. Part of the routing, we have things like, just the basic kind of which kind of mode of transport you want to use, but more importantly, optimize the route. Optimized route would work if you had a couple of accounts who were based north of Perth and a couple of based south in Perth, and if you were going up, down, and up, down, the route would go, okay, go north first, finish all the appointments, and come back south. But I won't just click on that now because all the accounts are clustered just around each other. I could basically click on that route. It comes back with a route there. You'll notice, and there's some additional times that I've shown behind the scene as a user has his own preference, or a field rep has a reference saying, I would normally have my meetings for 30 minutes or 60 minutes. They can set that. They can also have as a buffer time saying, e.g., I meet a customer 1, the next customer I want to give a 15-minute break. Things like that can be updated. And what this enables is if you had set your daytime working days to be, for example, 9 to 5, if you're going anything over, that kind of thing is captured, and also your travel is captured. This again enables sales managers to get a better visibility saying if their sales reps are working way too hard and what the travel has been, because then they want to log the kilometers that they've traveled within the system and so forth. Again, this really helps in various fields-based stuff as well. Now that I've done my planning, this could be that I want to visit them in the near future. I can click on Save Route, and I could save that route. What that enables is now when I log on to the tool using the Microsoft's app or our native app, the sales rep is represented with their save routes, for example, in here, and then on the phone itself, they can quickly turn on their turn-by-turn navigation. And now that I'm on the web browser, I can click on Google Maps, and that will open up Google Maps. But if you're on Android or on Apple, those respective maps would open up, e.g. Apple Maps and also the Google Maps. In the next, I think, release, we also got the option of turning on Waze Maps, but again, that's we're kind of looking into it at the moment. You'll notice that as well here. It's just giving you a high level how many kilometers you'll be traveling, what's the distance, what's the time, etc. And again, if you're over your buffer time, that will give you an indication there. I'll reset that now for the routes. We'll go back in here. So when I loaded the application, basically the Maptaskr went ahead and bought all the accounts for the current user in their given location and displayed them on the map. And that was set by the sales manager. The sales manager had gone, okay, I'm going to set this kind of query for my sales reps on their road when they need to see their accounts, and they can work on what kind of accounts they need to access. For example, if it's an account they haven't seen in the last 6 months and so forth, they can build those kind of logic in there. And I'll just quickly walk you through that. This was the query or the search feature that I ran. It took my current address, and if the sales rep was actually funny enough in Sydney, that address will get auto-populated depending on their location. But I could remove that and I go, okay, well, I'm in here, I'm in WA. I actually want to search for example, I'll put in my postcode again, same area. If I wanted to actually search on a given postcode, I can actually filter that out, and I can actually start going, I'm actually interested not only in my accounts, I'm interested in seeing in their contacts as well. Active contacts, I can keep adding them. I can also bring in appointments. I can bring in custom entities as well. So many organizations we work with have custom entities which have just example assets that have just lat longs in a given place that didn't have a postal address or a residential address. In that case, we can map those entities, bring that back in, and quickly search that kind of data. We'll bring that back, and they can start filtering the data. As you'll notice that those pins represent the colors, represent the type of entity we're looking at. For example, I've got just over 3 contacts there. I can switch again between to see what the accounts are. And you'll notice the total count at the bottom says I've got accounts and contacts. Again, I could select one of them, and there's bulk actions where you want to export them to Excel, or if you wanted to, or you can turn them off, and so forth. Once you've, as a user who's worked and planned their day, again, they don't want to do this activity every single time they access the application. They can go and basically query and update, because I loaded an existing application, sorry, a query, or I can go and save that as a new one. Because I have permissions of the sales manager, you're seeing additional options here. For example, this was the option of default query. For example, I could set this as a query called top accounts and contacts, and this is all the activities I've done so far. I can assign it to a security group. In this case, if I had sales reps and each of them were sitting in a different security group, I could assign them to, for example, marketing professionals, and then I could set that as a global query and also as a default query. What the default query is going to do is, once saved, it's going to be available for the users to use those queries that have been created by, say, for example, sales managers, or if they had their own personal ones. I haven't created any personal ones, but for example, I had a WA account. If I were to click on that, it should just bring back a query that was built earlier just to bring back all the accounts in our great state of WA, and it's put back there. And at the bottom, you'll notice there's over 2,000 records there. Again, you could use the geographic filter to build your query the way you want it to. In some cases, there might be the user didn't know where the contact or account is based. They could basically do a quick search. In this case, we'll basically search across all the entities that have been mapped and bring them down there. And you'll notice that there's 4 records there right in the middle of the ocean because the lat longs have been incorrect on those records. But you'll notice that there's lots of contacts and accounts that are spread across the country that I can basically see what those are. And then I might want to filter them by for example, Ingram as their last name. You can do all kinds of filtering and sorting as you would do in Dynamics as well within Maptaskr. That's from the searching perspective, and also planning their route. And also there's the calendar entry as well. If you did have your the appointments that I showed you earlier, in addition to that, if you had your appointments booked in Outlook, and if you had the sync happening, we'll bring back those appointments as well. And if you had any appointments, you can add them to route. That enables the sales reps just to be mindful of the activities that they're planning for a given day. They know that they have a personal dentist appointment, for example, and add them to route. From search, I wouldn't go in depth, but you can do things like territory. If you have a territory mapped, for example, custom territories, this could be sales boundaries or postcodes driven. You can map that within Dynamics, and we'll bring that in as well. And what we do is we'll add geographic feature on top of it in terms of territories. And you've got simple tools to draw. But one thing I would like to cover here in the next couple of minutes, rather than more searches, we have something called customer insights. Now that we've found a bunch of customers or accounts that you're working with, this is one of the highly used feature within Maptaskr is the ability to bring in external data sets and actually to overlay them and give you contextual information to different records that you're seeing on your system with external data as well. For example, just as a sample, I'll just bring in some. This is again preloaded data. I've used this in the GIS demonstrations as well. For example, in here, I've gone into main roads. Main roads have their APIs and their GIS system that you can connect into. I was basically quickly bring in, for example, what the traffic cameras are, right, around here. If I zoom in, and you'll notice all the traffic cameras show up, and there pops up along the freeway. We can see all of them popped up. And what this enables now is, of course, it's not giving me any contextual information to the accounts that I have, but if I was planning my route, I'm just mindful that I've got this kind of information that's available that you can quickly bring in. In most cases, what we have is we've got customers who have bought in third-party data sets that includes things like weather, because their customers involved or heavily involved in farming, for example, and anything that they sell to their customers, they need to be ensured that they've got weather kind of information taken into consideration. For example, in here, if I open up the national data back a few months ago when we had those terrible fires, we were able to bring in the rich fire data set. Even if I turn it on now, surprise, surprise, there's a lot of fires around the country, but they're not at a major ones. If you were going, the colors kind of represent, hotspots, satellite over last 2 hours, last 6 hours, and you can drill into them and just see, for example, now my account's in here, there's 3 of them that's close to one fire. If I were to plan to visit them, I might probably give them a ring first to make sure if they were all right in first place, but more importantly, if they were okay, and it was maybe could postpone the meeting or the appointment per se. So that way we enable you to bring in a lot of third-party data sets. These are OGC formats, for example, Google, KMLs, etc. And again, the administrators can come in there, basically quickly add these kind of file types, or even bring in rich data set, things like from Esri. We're an Esri partner. We can bring in, like we have got native support for their kind of data sets to bring in and demonstrate. But from the sales perspective, we've got a customer in Melbourne who uses the tool to basically do industry insights, where they actually bring in their competitions data in, they bring in the weather data, and then they actually create their sales plan for the next 6 months, saying which suburbs and which LGAs that they're going to concentrate in terms of their sales activities. So it enables us a sales planning tool, also for a number of sales reps on the road to quickly get access to that information that normally would have taken a bit longer in some instances. By using the mapping interface, we make hopefully make the sales reps and sales managers' life easier. And most of this, the features that you've seen here is purely built on feedback from customers that we've had over the years, and what you're seeing basically is customers using this on a daily basis. I'm mindful of time. I would jump onto the slides, and actually I want to move on to any questions. Did that make sense to you guys? Because I kind of rushed there with mindful of 20 minutes. I can see it's 18 minutes ticking. Would you guys have any questions, high-level questions that I could answer in the next couple of minutes?
Ravi, it's Ben here. Just a quick question on offline capabilities with the application. I'm assuming that this being within the web client, there probably isn't that ability yet, or is there something?
So with the offline capability, we actually we provide that in the field services space. In the field sales, we've found actually 0 users actually using it. We can get that to work with our native app. We can enable that, but it comes down to, in terms of the users being aware of which location they actually need to go, because you need to preload the map, because you want to can't load the whole country or a whole state in some instances. But with the field services, we can actually enable a larger portion of offline maps. But again, these might be something called vector maps. What we mean by that is you might not actually see what you're seeing in terms of here, the rich content, the base maps where the roads get broken down, etc. But we'll give you high-level highways and the roads, etc. We can do that at the field services. We kind of offer that natively. On the mobile side of things, it's a use by use cases.
Yep. Does that bring in also the external data sets as well?
Yes.
Based on the region? Yes.
Yes,
okay, cool.
Absolutely. And these external data sets, depending where they are, of course, if you go offline, if that external data set is like, for example, the main roads one, it's kind of streamed. Of course, you're not going to get that. But there's certain data sets that you can actually download and upload. We can actually have them as an offline content and bring them on as well.
Cool. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Ravi. That was good.
Great. Thanks, guys. I will hand over to David now. Thank you.
So next, Ian is going to take us through some business rules config records.
Hello. Let me share my screen. This is going to be fairly quick. Let me know when everybody can see my screen.
Yeah, we got it.
Cool. Okay. So over the last few months, I've actually been doing quite a bit with portals, and particularly a lot of RFPs and stuff that rely on basically saying, well, how easy is it to customize your portal? And one of the frustrating things about portals is obviously the business rules that you set up in Dynamics don't execute on the portal. Even if you try and do them at entity level, it just gives you an error. So it'll stop you adding anything, but it won't actually work effectively on the portal. So I was looking around for something and thought, well, this got to be something around that will make things a little bit easier, rather than me having to write custom JavaScript on every form to make sure that fields show and hide, they're set mandatory. And I came across this blog where he's done a very, if you like, rough and ready solution, where you can import the solution in Dynamics instance and actually manage some basic portal rules, just like you can with the Dynamics 365 business rules via configuration on the, if you like, the entity forms, the web forms in Dynamics 365 in the portal management. He's actually piggybacking on stuff that was done by one of Andrew Light's colleagues, I believe. I can't pronounce his name, Ang Kang. So he's actually piggybacking on some of the work that he did on this JavaScript, and he's basically put in a solution. So very quickly, I'm going to very quickly show you how this works. There's a solution you can download. I can put this link or maybe in the window, maybe later. And essentially that takes you to the GitHub page. You have to install a solution. You set up one web file, which is a link to basically that JavaScript file I was talking about. And then when you set up your entity forms, for example, I've got the contact us form here. And I've added a simple, we've got how do you hear about us. You can see when I click an advertisement here, the advertisement source appears and is required. When I click on employee referral, it disappears. And similarly with a partner. I haven't actually done the partner one yet. So if we go on to an entity form, for example, when you've installed the solution, and you click on the lead, in additional settings, this works for web forms as well as entity forms. Once you scroll down here, there will eventually be a portal business rules section. Now, in here, for example, you can see I've jumped on, if I jump to this one I've already created, you basically set up the form and it kind of pretty much pre-fills everything. And if I do this one now for, what was the other thing I had in the form? Let's have a look very quickly. Partner name. So for example, I want to do something for partner name. If I created a new one here, so if I jump back off here and wait for it all to load again. Now this is, you can also get it in unmanaged solutions. You can obviously take it, expand it out, because it is, like I said, fairly rough and ready at the moment. Partner. And when you save this initially, it then gives you a list of fields on your thing. So I can go advertisement source, or what was it? That wasn't advertisement. How did you hear about us? If I do hear about us and I click partner, and you put equals, you can see partner for. So I saved, and then you got the action. So it's basically when the lead source code is partner, and you've got these actions. So I can basically say here, okay, we'll show the new partner name, and also make it required. Partner must be entered. And then if it's false, I can basically go hide field, partner name, and you could also clear the value if you want. I'm not going to bother doing that at the moment. And then you have to publish it. So I'll save this first and then I'll publish it. Now, obviously, I probably need an admin user to refresh this, but let's see whether it'll just work anyway. Because obviously the portal is probably cached it. Just see if I can just run a new incognito window. Maybe this will work. Well, doesn't seem to. I think it still cached it. Which is annoying. I did publish it, yeah. So the idea here is you can see the one that worked before. If I drop back into the. Oh, there we go. The one I've set up previously. I probably should have comment is a source advert. Same kind of thing. So all it basically says is here, if the lead source code is 1, show the field new make required. If it's not, hide it. So essentially that's what this is doing here. So when I go advertisement, showing it. When you go to for it's hiding it. And if you go back onto the actual rule itself, you can actually see the generated JavaScript. And the one real caveat to all of this is the fact that obviously if you have different JavaScript in your additional custom JavaScript, which isn't form part of these business rules, then you'll essentially need to be careful about how you use this, because obviously what essentially it does is it. Oh, is it not on that one? I can't remember where it is. This one, maybe. If you go down here, it's actually written the JavaScript directly in the custom JavaScript in the form. And this is obviously using in the background using some of that stuff that Owen King did with his JavaScript. But essentially, it's a nice, neat way. If you want something really quick and easy to get stuff up and running, and obviously because it's an unmanaged solution, you can also take it and run with it and extend it out. It's a nice way to kind of get some really nice features really quickly, just to like do some basic show hide, set required, set not required kind of processing on the portal. So let's just see if, for argument's sake, will this magically work now? If I refresh it again, yes, it has. There you go. So if I now go partner, it appears, external word disappears. Okay, so that in a very high level, I thought it'd be useful for anybody that does some portal work. I've kind of wanted to find something like this for a while. I have a long list of things that I'd like to do with portal business rules, but this is kind of working for now. Hopefully, eventually Microsoft might actually make the business rules engine actually work across all their platforms. But for now, it's kind of a nice way to get up and running quickly if you need that kind of functionality. Okay, guys, anybody got any questions or?
Very cool function. Thank you for sharing.
Very good.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much. That's awesome.
I shall hand back.
All right, and for our educational session, Goodbye Workflows, Hello Power Automate. Byron, please take over and present.
Oh, thank you, guys. Thank you also for inviting me to present today. I really appreciate it. And yeah, let's get started. I'm going to share my screen. Just give me 1 second. Okay. On screen one. All right. So today's slides really that I'm going to go through with you is based on replacing old workflows with obviously flows, right? I just want to make sure you guys can see the correct screen because I think I'm presenting to one screen and not the other. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Oh, okay, I can see, you can see my Power Automate screen. There we go. What is going on here? Sorry, just give me 1 second, guys. I have to apologize.
Just present your desktop, it might be easier, Byron.
Excuse me?
Present your desktop rather than individual.
Yeah, no, I did that, but what's happening is it's flipping between two screens. I did that, I won't be long. Okay, you know what, in the interest of time, I'm just going to change my sharing options. Give me 1 second. Okay, we should get the right result this time. There we go. I'm just going to jump through the slides from earlier today, and then we can get going. Okay, so today's slides is basically for a Dynamics user who normally builds workflows, or alternatively for a CRM consultant or functional consultant that is normally using workflows and hasn't quite gotten into flow yet. So the basics of how do I transition, the very, very basics of how do I get to recreate my workflows into flows. Okay, so essentially, let's just go through some of the real basics here, the differences between workflows and Power Automate flows. I put the word Power Automate flows mainly because some people are still accustomed to the word flow and some Power Automate, but this session is specifically dealing with the relationship between Power Automate and Dynamics 365. Okay, so first of all, where do you find it? So if you go to portal.office.com, if you've got your licenses in place, then by going to portal.office.com, you'll find the Power Automate logo, obviously over here, where you can access it directly from there. So those of you who are already accustomed to building workflows in Dynamics 365, you'll know you'll find that in your advanced settings. Okay. Then Some key differences between the two, the different types of workflows. Obviously, Dynamics 365, we have automated and on-demand workflows. Automated meaning something needs to happen and the workflow will fire, or on-demand means I can choose when I want this workflow to fire. Power Automate has automated and instant. So instant is actually an on-demand workflow, and then scheduled, which is something we've been waiting for ever since Dynamics was, I think, invented. Let's continue. Some triggers. So triggers are the things that actually get the workflow going or started, right? So what actually triggers it? So from a Dynamics perspective, we have create trigger on the change of a field, the change of a status of a record, when a record is assigned or when a record is deleted. These are events that take place that can trigger a workflow to perform an action, for example. Okay. On the Power Automate side, we have a considerable amount more triggers, right? So I just jotted a couple down just to give you the basic highlight of it. But the Dynamics triggers, yes, you can do the create, on change, and assign. So I actually made specific reference here to Dynamics triggers because you'll see later in the demo, you can trigger from Common Data Service or trigger from Dynamics, and there is a slight difference between the two. And then from a Common Data Service, you can also obviously trigger based on a record being selected, which is really nice. And then from Power Automate, using the Power Automate, you can create buttons. So buttons in terms of on mobile application from the Power App side, or in email buttons and so forth. And also on third-party applications. So when I say third-party applications, I mean like on SharePoint. When something happens in SharePoint, Flow will trigger and go and do and perform some update, for example, in Dynamics 365, or when someone fills in your Google form, that will capture that information in the Google form and pass it into Dynamics 365. So the advantage that we have with Power Automate is basically, instead of being closed inside Dynamics, we can now bring information from outside data sources into Dynamics using Flow, and also likewise in the opposite direction, we can take Dynamics information out to third-party data sources or places we want to store data, like Excel sheets and so forth. Another one which is quite interesting is being able to connect two separate Dynamics 365 subscriptions. So for example, I've got a complete new different subscription, different URL, it's its own tenant, and I've got another address. I can actually connect the two of them and perform almost like a synchronization between the two using Dynamics 365. So for example, when a contact is created in my branch in, let's say, South Africa, I want a copy of that contact to be created in the Australian tenant. So we could do those type of things with Power Automate, where we couldn't do them with workflows. We'd need to write plugins and so forth to be able to do that. All right, so let's continue. All right, great. Let's do some, not questions yet. I'm just going to switch over to my other desktop so that we can do a little bit of demos. All right, any questions so far? No? Good. All right, you can see my screen yet? Not yet.
I think so. I think we can see.
Yeah, there we go. Here comes the correct one.
Yep.
Okay.
We got it.
All right. So I've got a couple of simple ones here that I'm going to show you. So for example, if we were to create a workflow, and this is the typical configuration for a workflow where we wanted the workflow to start based on a record being created. So I would just basically select over here, start when record is created. Now I'd set it as a process and choose the entity as an account, for example. And anytime an account is created, it would execute or would start, and my process would start. So how do I do this same setup inside Flow or Power Automate? So the same one would be referred to as an automated flow. I like to actually just skip this part because it's a little bit easier if you just go past it. I'm going to show you two methods. The first one is we're going to look for Dynamics, and this will give us the list of Dynamics triggers, and then when a record is created. And then the only difference is here, because I'm connecting from outside Dynamics, I need to choose the environment. So I'll choose the environment, and then I'm going to enter the name of the entity that I wanted to trigger on. Let me just wait for that to eventually find it. Come on. It's taking its time to find the entity. Okay, it'll resolve in a second. So this is essentially exactly the same way that I have configured the workflow over here. It's exactly the same way. There is one small difference though, is the scope. So the scope you can't set on the Dynamics trigger. We have to use a different trigger for that, and that trigger is called a common data service trigger. So for example, I'm going to go exactly the same process to create a new workflow, except I'm going to select common data service, which gives me a little bit more control. So when a new record is created, you'll see now I've got the scope included. So I'll choose my organization. Come on. There we go. Choose the entity. And then set the scope. And then from there, I've done, this is actually a like-for-like configuration of the actual workflow. All right. Now, likewise, if we wanted to do on field change or on change of a field, so for example, when a field changes its value from yes to no in terms of a 2-option field, or you wanted to trigger your workflow based on an option set, you could do that as well. And how would you do it over here? In the configuration of a workflow, we would select on field change, and then we'd obviously go and choose a field that we want to actually trigger our workflow on. So let's say, for example, on let's take address 1 city. Okay, so do we just pick any random one? So now I just want to just open that one more time. So if we see address 1 city, that's the field we need to trigger it on. But I'm going to copy this over here, and you'll see why now I'm copying that. So that's pretty much it. So anytime that field changes a value or changes, my workflow will fire. When it comes to configuring exactly the same thing in Flow, to basically listen for a specific field, there is a method to do this. So the first time I actually came across this, I actually found that using Dynamics actually can't do it. So for example, if I choose Dynamics and I say when a record is updated, it doesn't give me the option to actually pick a specific field. It will actually fire every time the record is updated. So that's a nuance you might want to remember. So the correct way to do it is actually using a common data service. And if we go when a record is updated, we can now set the environment, choose the entity. Come on. Why is it taking so long this time? Okay. I'm just going to refresh. Oh, there we go. I was about to say I'm going to refresh. There we go. All right. Now, if I click on the show advanced options, it's asking me for an attribute. What this attribute is that field. So when I select the field, so what's going to happen now is my flow will not trigger until there's a change event that takes place on this field. And then from here, I can go and add my different actions after that. So that's how you configure it to the flow to trigger based on a field. All right. So on status change, I'm not going to show you well, I'll show you quickly on Dynamics. On Dynamics, when a field changes status, I go and select record changes status, and my workflow will fire to do exactly the same thing on this side over here. I go on flow, go skip, and you can do it this one straight on Dynamics if you wanted to, or on common data service. To be honest, I think it's best practice for you to just create all your flows on Dynamics itself. Okay. All right. So here, when a record is updated, in actual fact, sorry, let me withdraw that statement. You won't be able to do it with Dynamics. You'll need to actually use Power Automate to actually go listen to the change of the ownership field. Okay, so over here, when a record is updated, and then I will go and select the owner field over here. And then when the owner field changes, then I'll make some decisions in some conditional branching. All right. Okay, then obviously the delete condition, if a record is deleted, exactly the same thing. I can go and set up my trigger. So basically all I'm doing is I'm just choosing the event of how I'm going to actually start the flow itself. All right. Then from an instant flow perspective, so instant flows, we need to think of it as we remembered in Dynamics, we would create what we call on-demand flows, right? So an on-demand flow means we go and set it on demand over here so that when we want to run the flow, that the flow is available to run in our entity. So if I go into accounts, for example, and I go and choose an account, all accounts, select an account, for example, and then click on, hold on, where is my flow? There we go. Click over here. So this is where my on-demand workflows will now appear. So it'll be a combination of actually your flows and on-demand workflows that will sit over here when it finishes loading. All right, there we go. So we can see currently there's no on-demand workflow. So how do we create an on-demand flow that works the same as a workflow? So to recap, we set a workflow over here as on-demand, and this will allow the workflow to appear over here in under your flow button. Your workflow will appear there. If I want to create an on-demand flow, I can do that as well by going to select instant, skip, give it a name, let's say common data service. I'm going to say when a record is selected, which environment, default, and then you basically go through the same steps and go and add your actions after that. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. Then, for example, one more thing I wanted to show you is I wanted to show you something called conditional branching. So in our workflows, we are able to make decisions, and the decisions we make we call check conditions. So check conditions means I can put in some parameters to say if the status is active, do this. If it's not active, do something else. So I'm going to assume you are familiar with how that works in a workflow, because the point of this exercise is to show how to convert these workflows into Power Automate flows. Okay, so let's go back, and we're going to create a new flow that, let's say, for example, sends an email based on a condition. All right. So I'm going to select, let me go over here. I'm going to select a instant flow and skip common data service. When I selected, which environment, default, entity, account. Okay. I'm going to do that. All right. So I've selected a starting point. Now I want to put in a condition. So we call this a control and a condition control. So it's going to ask us for a value here. So the value, when I select this field, you'll see it'll come up with dynamic content. So it's asking me which field am I referring to. So for example, if I said, let's say, what field can we use here? I'm just going to say account name, for example, is equal to test, then go and perform this action, right? So I'm going to go and say on the common data service, I want to update the record. It's going to ask me what I want to update. Choose the environment, choose the entity. So now this is quite interesting. Why is it asking me to choose the entity again? It's actually asking me to choose the entity because I can actually have a flow trigger based off one entity, and I'm going to go update a different entity. And in this instance, I'm just going to update the very same record. It's asking me what's the record identifier. So the record identifier is basically saying, okay, if it's this environment and that entity, which record do you want me to update? And what we're going to do is we want to actually pick the record that happened in the initial trigger over here, which we, in this term, is going to be the account ID. So if you look on your dynamic content, you'll see the account ID. If we select the account ID, then it knows that that's the field that I'm actually talking about. If I click on show advanced options, you'll see now it'll actually give me all the fields. Okay, so I can go down here and go and choose a field, for example, description, say this was updated by flow, for example, and click on save. All right, so in essence, what is going to happen here is if I select a record and I run this flow, if the account name is equal to test, then it will go and update the actual account itself. Okay. We can now give our flow a name by selecting the top over here. Okay, once I give it a name, click on save, and that's it. So what will happen if we can actually just give it a test if we want to. I'm going to take any one of those accounts. Let's just take Alpine Ski House and go and change the name of this account. I'll call this account test. Now let's save that. All right. Okay, so now that it's saved, I'm going to refresh one more time. I just want to make sure my flow is going to show over here. Okay, there we go. And then if I go over here, I'll see my flows, wait for them to load. Okay, it hasn't loaded. Let's go and see why, what's going on. Let's try and test this flow. Okay, that's right. Okay, any questions at this point, people? Yes, no, maybe. Okay. All right. Then let's go here. Let's see if it's showing. It should be showing. There we go. So there's my flow now. I can click on it. Let's just wait for it to load. There we go. It's going to just ask me for some permissions and then click on run flow. There we go. My flow's run. If I can go to the flow run page, it'll actually show me the test results of the run history. You can see that it ran. It took 7 seconds to run, or the duration actually was 1 second, and it succeeded. And let's go and look at the decision path it took. So it did trigger on, it reached the condition. The expression, you see it came out here, it says the result was true, which means the account name is test. It came down here, it went and ran the update, and you can actually see the data of actually what actually took place in this actual update, which is pretty cool. All right, so I like using flow. I think it's fantastic when it comes to giving you a lot more control and flexibility over what you can actually do using flows. Just a quick note from me with regards to using flows within the depth of the actual conditions. So you'll have one condition at the top. Let's call this your top level condition, 8 left and 8 right. So you can't exceed that depth. I hope that makes sense. So once you reach a depth of 8 on either given side, on left or right, it actually won't allow you to add one more step. So you just got to kind of design your flows quite nicely, or alternative, use the parent and child type flows. So have a flow start and then call a child flow. So I'm not going to get into too much technical detail with creating advanced flows now, but just some basics to get you started on how you actually configure your basic flows or get the process started to at least start converting your workflows into Power Automate flows. All right, cool. Thank you very much. Open for questions.
Great, thank you very much. That was fantastic. Just as Ian's called out in the chat, the Dynamics 365 connector has been deprecated. I've actually got customers that are experiencing issues with the Dynamics 365 connector where it doesn't trigger within like the minutes that it used to. It actually, for them, was not triggering for a couple of hours. So just be
I've
warned
actually
and aware of
experienced that too.
Yeah.
And not only that, but the CDS connector that's being shown there is the old CDS connector. There's a much newer one that's available if you build your flows inside a solution. You'll find you get a heap load more options.
Oh, fantastic.
They're not maintaining that old CDS connector. It is needed for the when a record is selected, because they haven't still added that into the new CDS connector. But there is if you create your flow inside of a solution rather than outside of it in My Flows, you will get two connectors when you search for CDS. If you select the second one, you will then see you get there's only one trigger, which has all sorts of different options, like you can do when created, deleted, when created, updated. And then there's a whole heap more actions available on that trigger, which aren't there for the old CDS connector. So just a couple of things there to be aware of, guys.
Cool. Thank you so much for that. That's fantastic.
What I might throw out there for a one tip for next month, see if we can get a volunteer for how to convert your existing flows that use the Dynamics or CDS Connector 1 into the new world.
yeah. Well, I've already covered the lookup things, which are the gotchas between the two lookups. But yeah, we can potentially, maybe I'll have a look and see whether I can dig up with that.
Fantastic.
Thank you. All right, where are these slides gone? So any questions for our presenters or any other questions before we wrap up?
Not from
The
my
pizza
side,
hasn't
thank you.
arrived.
Yeah,
I'm
still
sorry,
waiting for the peak.
One thing just to share that you may not have seen that was announced today is that the Outlook.com add-in for Dynamics has finally been deprecated for the second time and will be
Hurrah!
continued from the 1st of October this year. So yes, if you do have any customers left using that, then they've only got a few more months to get off of it.
Thanks,
Thanks
Peter.
for letting us know.
All right, so the next user group is set for the 30th of April. I don't see the time on there. Ben, are we doing that one at lunchtime or in the evening?
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking if the conditions with this COVID-19 continue on the way they are, I have a feeling that the 12 o'clock slot might be the better thing to do from a live streaming event during people's lunch times. What do people think? Maybe
I think and it maybe gives us an option to get a speaker from over east as well, potentially, because it's more friendly to Sydney and Adelaide.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think we can make the call on that and just make it same time, same place, online at 12 p.m. And we'll keep doing that until I guess things start to settle down a bit. Never know, we might actually continue doing it this way. Who knows?
All right, thank you very much. Thank you everyone for joining in, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you so much.
Guys, cheers all. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cool.
Cheers,
Thank
guys.
you, everyone.